Okay, perfect. So thank you all for joining us for our 6th Tuesday Talks with Alumni session. I know many of you have participated with us from the beginning, and if you are new to Tuesday Talks, welcome. So in addition to recording, we also have live transcription available for this session. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should be able to hit the live transcript button if you would like to enable that feature. All right, so just a quick introduction. I'm Jillian Moyes. I'm a PhD candidate in sociology. I also serve as this year's graduate student advisor to the Dean and Chancellor. And so that basically means I serve as an advocate for my fellow graduate and professional students at UC Davis. I will make sure to drop my email in the chat momentarily so you can have access to that if you have any questions. And I just want to talk briefly about the Tuesday Talks with Alumni series. It was developed as part of my GSADC project in collaboration with graduate studies staff, and including Jessica Failer-Ward, who's with us on the call today. And this spring quarter series is designed to provide graduate students an opportunity to informally connect with advanced degree alumni who have successfully navigated graduate school at UC Davis, who also come from diverse academic fields and professional backgrounds. For these sessions, each alum have shared and continue to share their experiences and personal perspectives on a professional development topic of their choosing. And so after today's talk, we'll actually have 2 more sessions in the month of May. And in a moment, I will also drop the link for the remaining Tuesday talks so you can see that information. A couple of quick housekeeping items before I officially introduce our speakers. So I'm going to ask to please remember to keep your mics muted during the presentation. After the talk, we'll have between 15 and 20 minutes for questions. And at that point, you can either use the raise your hand function and I'll call on you and you can ask your question aloud, or you can type your questions in the chat, which I will read. So I'm excited to introduce our 2 speakers who will be giving a presentation on finding work-life balance, particularly in the COVID era, from 2 perspectives, business and academia. So Jennifer Nakayama is licensed as a civil engineer, as well as sits on multiple boards of directors. She received her undergraduate degree in environmental engineering at California Polytechnic San Luis Obispo, and her master's degree in civil engineering at the University of California, Davis. Jennifer took her current position as the president and executive director of the Waikiki Business Improvement District Association in 2017. Established as a nonprofit organization, the WBIDA works in partnership with the city of Honolulu to emphasize a clean and safe Waikiki district through services and initiatives for the public. Jennifer and her husband reside in Hawaii with their son and dog, and in her personal time, she enjoys cooking, yoga, and dabbling as a book author. Dr. Karina Nakayama received her PhD from the Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of California, Davis, and completed her postdoctoral training at Stanford University School of Medicine in the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Dr. Nakayama joined the faculty at Oregon Health and Science University in the Department of Biomedical Engineering as an assistant professor in January of 2020. And the overarching scientific mission of the Nakayama Lab is to develop treatments for cardiovascular and musculoskeletal injuries using regenerative bioengineering strategies. She also serves as the co-director of the OHSU Biomedical Engineering Graduate Program. Please help me in welcoming both Karina and Jennifer Nakayama. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Aloha, everyone. It may or may not be completely apparent by our introductions, but I'm sure that all of you being associated with UC Davis, you have clued into our last names. Karina and I are indeed sisters. I am the older sister and Karina is the younger sister, but we both are alumni of UC Davis. Wasn't necessarily the plan, from birth. But it happened to work out, and we both loved our time in Davis. So we're glad to be able to talk to you today on this very non-technical topic. I think it's very pertinent. We think it's very pertinent to what we're all dealing with. And just as was stated in the introduction, to look at it from the business, the traditional office type of perspective, industry, and then as well as Karina will be able to provide the perspective from academia. So with that, Jillian, do we have the poll available?
Yes.
So we wanted to just do a quick poll of the audience that we have here today to see what proportions there are from academia versus the business industry side. So we'll let that go for a couple more seconds. Thank you for those of you who are filling out the poll. It looks like it's pretty evenly split. Yeah, it looks like it's actually pretty evenly split. Academia hedged out business industry by just a smidgen. But so we will give equal time, of course, to both today. And actually, there's a lot that applies to both. You know, it doesn't matter what industry, what career role you have taken, but so much is actually the same because of work-life balance nowadays. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the question of the day is, why can't we find work-life balance during COVID? You know, what is work-life balance? That's the buzzword, has been the buzzword for decades now, right? And even more so during COVID, does it even have any meaning anymore? So how do we manage both our personal and professional priorities? Again, whether you're in business or in academia, there are a number of ways that it is overlapping. You know, the ever elusive work-life balance is not necessarily a balance after all. So the pandemic has really put all of us on this professional and personal roller coaster, blending everything together unlike anything before. So we wanted to point out that with so many of us working from home, there's actually, we wanted to think of it as a twist on work-life balance that may be more accurately described as life-work. So switch it around, in that our personal lives have become so increasingly important like never before because of the blend that has happened during the last year plus. So let me jump into the business world side of industry and office settings. I think first I wanted to cover that the obvious, that COVID has certainly changed things in the office environment. You know, we are living in a new world of standard personal protection equipment. Offices that never had a need for OSHA and PPE before, personal protective equipment, now suddenly do. And it's a whole big slate of requirements and guidelines on what to do and what to not do. We're living in the world of face masks and temperature checks. You know, I put up this little cartoon graphic because it was obviously crafted up before COVID. I mean, you look at it and what do you think more instantaneously is, oh my gosh, all these COVID violations right there on the screen. You see no one's wearing masks, obviously. Everybody is well within closer than 6 to 10 feet of distance. So there's no social distancing there. The one gentleman, in fact, is leaning on that water cooler. Oh my gosh, touching something in the office, and all the wipe down that would need to happen after that point, and what have you. There's also the cups that are on the side of the water cooler. You know, was a commonplace perhaps before, common or shared utensils, things like that in the office that definitely have gone away and either are replaced by other means or are not going to come back to any office setting for the foreseeable future. So we have some return to work policies that are unlike any before. The types of leave and absences that the pandemic has spurred on, whether it's mandated because of your local government or your state government, or federally, there's a lot for employees and employers in business to consider on who comes back to work, who does not, what is allowed on leave and what is not. that it opens up, as actually the last bullet on this section implies, vaccinations coming to the forefront, ADA stipulations, new human resources, standard operating procedures. All of that ties into return to work in a way that definitely we haven't had to look at before. Travel restrictions, we see in office and business industry, whether it's internal to the organization, or again, there are restrictions because of local regulations or state regulations. Travel has become really, really minimal. I'm sure that Dr. Nakayama is going to talk about this too, because especially in academia, relying on conferences and others in your industry to be able to share knowledge and to share ideas and to collaborate, it's just not the same without in-person conferences like we once had, which leads to virtual meetings and training. We'll actually talk about this in a later slide, but meetings and trainings have all come into this virtual format. Obviously, case in point, we're staring at each other in all these little grid screens right here and right now. And that seems to be the status quo for the foreseeable future. Staggered staffing and schedules. I know for my business, my organization, we have done this. We have implemented this in the office so that we minimize the amount of people that are going to be in contact with each other potentially, even if we stay in our own offices. There's some common areas in the office. So we're trying to stagger schedules as best as possible, but in industry and the business world, that may or may not be possible. Remote working may or may not be possible. You may have a job and a type of business that really needs a strict 8 to 5 or open, like a store that's open from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. and you can't waver from that. So there's a number of different ways that it's being applied across the industry. Another thing I wanted to point out from the business industry perspective is things have gone, shall we say, down and decreased in this pandemic, but things have also gone up during this pandemic. And those that have decreased are obviously revenue and profits for any for-profit business. Also for a nonprofit organization like I work for, our revenue is based on the livelihood of the businesses in the Waikiki district. And so therefore our revenue is down as well. They're not doing good. They're not going to be able to put into our organization like they once were able to. Down also, decrease in staffing and hiring. Salaries are having to take a cut in many areas. I know that both Karina and I were subject to some of these salary reductions during the COVID process, and rightly so. We are leaders within our respective organizations, and so setting the example has been something that we've seen a lot in industry, as in terms of turning down your salaries or your merit increases. Employee morale has certainly gone down depending upon your organization. Some have really taken this and tried to do things that are non-traditional. Typically your morale would be boosted by, hey, let's have an in-person event, let's have a party or a happy hour or an employee picnic kind of thing, and none of those things obviously are very able to happen now. So how do we do things that are more creative? Going back to the picture for just a moment, things that have decreased are things in the office like camaraderie that is as built and felt by the water cooler talk. We don't have these little conversations about what used to be, maybe we saw as mundane. How's the weather? How's your kids? How's your dog? What are you doing this weekend? But all of those little things add up to so much about building that feeling of trust and relationship with your coworkers, whether they are superior to you or subordinate, and that's just gone now. In terms of increasing though, operational costs have gone up. in business industry, mainly the PPE that I was talking about earlier, all of the additional safety protocols and things like that, physical barriers. Digital and tech, the increase has been on the IT risk side, with so many of us working from home and the vulnerability that our home network systems may open up. This is a big increase in the IT industry. Reorganizations have happened. That's kind of a nice-ish way of saying staffing and hiring have decreased. And a lot of businesses have taken that opportunity to do a reorganization and a reallotment of job descriptions and change management in that way. And some businesses have actually taken this to a different level for additional strategic planning and construction. They've seen this as a downtime. I can say in the tourism industry here in Hawaii, there are a number of businesses that actually went and moved forward on plans for renovations that may have been originally planned for a couple years out, but while there is very little travel happening, why don't we do the construction now? It'll impact a smaller group of people, and then those new renovations will be ready to go as soon as travel resumes. So that has been a different way of looking at the upside of the pandemic. So that's just a snippet of the business side. Now I wanted to turn it over to Karina, who will be focusing on the academia side.
Yeah, well, thanks for that perspective. And yeah, so so also Jennifer's controlling the slides. So sorry for the bit of delay, but I'm just gonna tell her whenever we need to move to another slide. So I'm a big fan of PhD comics. They kind of got me through my own grad school. And a lot of times, like a lot of my frustrations was very well represented by this illustrator. And so this is actually kind of an older comic that I crossed out the top part and labeled it the pandemic. But it kind of holds true for a lot of grad students anyway. So like the pro to academia, and also now even more than ever living in the pandemic and being in academia in the time of the pandemic, is that you can work whenever you want. Every day is a Saturday. So whether that's late at night or early in the morning, you stay up late. Everything's kind of fair game. But then that's also the con, is that you just don't have any boundaries. Every day is a Saturday, and your PIs and your mentors and your committees and everybody starts to function that same way. And so you'll get emails on Saturdays, on Sundays, after hours, just because there's really not that same boundary that exists. And so it becomes really difficult to set aside time where you can just decompress, get your thoughts together, and not feel like you're always on and always available, and that you're not being judged for not always being on and always being available. Next slide. So sorry for all of the transitions. I realize that there's a bit of a lag with the transmission, but I wanted to give some really quick slides into my background and kind of how I became an assistant professor and went into biomedical engineering. And so I started off, same with Jennifer, we were raised in a smaller town in Southern California. And I spent a lot of my childhood on a farm, and that really shaped kind of my perspective of, creativity and the world being my oyster, and asking all of these questions about, how animals live and work, and how plants function. But really, so if you want to click ahead to the next one, the main reason why I got into the field of science is because of my grandmother. And so she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was pretty young, and she was my world. Like, she played dress up with me. She entertained me for countless hours. And so when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a really hard reality as even a 5-year-old to grasp that, like, my grandmother was no longer recognizing who I was. And so that emotional journey led me to always have science at the forefront of my motivation and my goal, and what really drove me all through high school and then into undergrad and grad school to pursue biomedical engineering, because I wanted to figure out how diseases came about and how we can use regenerative medicine to treat those diseases. Next slide. So can we get oh, there we go. Sorry. I know I'm not sure if I'm just seeing the lag on my end or not. So I did my undergrad at UC San Diego. I did this in bioengineering and biotechnology. So my research there was focused on doing a lab on the chip kind of project where we were looking at different fusion proteins and looking at the life cycle of yeast and using some bioinformatics to try and track the different life cycles of these 3 different fusion proteins and when they were expressed in the life cycle of these yeasts. But also to kind of keep everything balanced, I actually did, I ended up with a minor. I was like 2 classes away from a double major, which to this day still bugs me, where I'm like, if I took 2 more dance classes, I could have had that double major. But so I have a minor in theater and dance. And that was one of the amazing balances of having a very rigorous, undergrad major balanced with something like theater and dance, which was a really great creative outlet. So next slide. And so then I did my graduate work at UC Davis, and this almost actually didn't happen. I was really burnt out at the end of my undergrad career, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to stay in academia, and thinking about, do I really want to do research 24/7? Do I want to write grants for a living? I don't know, but I decided to apply anyways. I actually got a job offer from a local dance agency, so I was like weighing the 2 back and forth, and it was actually almost, it's not the most like elegant story, but it was just kind of a 50-50 coin toss. And I decided, well, let's go and get a graduate degree. So I ended up going to UC Davis and majoring in biomedical engineering. I did my research actually over at the Primate Research Center. So that's kind of like 3 miles out in the middle of nowhere. And so I did tissue engineering out there under Alice Tarantal. And so what we did was we looked at engineering renal tissues from decellularized matrices. And so that was kind of a fun, like creative way that I could kind of bring in more of my creative juices and tie in science. So next slide. And so I always kind of knew that I wanted to do tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. It just kind of varied what field I was in. Started out with kidney engineering. I switched over to cardiothoracic surgery, which led me to cardiovascular engineering. And I did that for about 7 years over at Stanford. I had a really long postdoc. So my postdoc was 5 years. Tried to get a faculty position. That's a whole nother story and an insight that I can provide if you're interested into the whole faculty job search. And so I searched for 3 years. The first year got no responses whatsoever. The second year I got 1 interview. And then third year was kind of the good year where I got quite a few interviews and landed my current position at OHSU. So next slide. So kind of bringing it now full circle, I am an assistant professor over at OHSU. And so like many of you right now, we are still in modified operations. And that means like a full gamut of things where for a year, we are a biomedical engineering lab. That means that we do animal studies, we do wet lab work, we rely on every core that is available, from imaging to flow cytometry to biofabrication, and all of those were shut down. And so we had a really, really steep decline in our research. And I actually started about 2 months before the pandemic hit. So I started in January of 2020, and it's just enough time to be super excited about starting a new job, and then to have everything frozen, could not purchase anything, couldn't hire anybody. And so now we're finally, our lab is growing. We have 6 people in our lab. We've got grad students, we've got research assistants, we've got a really great team that we've been able to develop. But in the meantime, there is definitely a big lull in productivity, and everybody was really struggling to adjust to this new normal of a research environment where students had to make progress, but then how can they make progress if they're not actually in the lab? So next slide. Okay. So there's kind of a lot on this slide. And so what I would encourage you that if you do have the time, there is this paper called Academia in the Time of COVID-19 Towards an Ethics of Care. And so this paper kind of touched on a lot of different topics that are pretty important to kind of, mediating this whole new world in academia during COVID, which we thought was going to be pretty short and turned out to kind of be, everlasting and might still continue for quite some time. But this paper does provide some insights into how things have changed, how they currently are, and how they might change in the future. So the thing is that this was actually written, I think, in May. So, this was written back when they thought like, okay, this might be the worst of it. And I think other papers now have come out that have realize that, yeah, this is a different kind of strategy now that we're looking at this kind of long term. But I think a lot of these principles still apply now to, how we navigate academia. And so what we've seen is that there's definitely a reorganization of our tasks and priorities, how we communicate. We've realized that the whole virtual space really highlights the inequalities that we have, just as a community, that we can't assume that everybody has a place to work from home, that they have a quiet place, that they're able to, take calls whenever we feel like they should be able to take calls. And we've seen, into, glimpses into people's lives that we were never really ever intended to see in the first place. And, I think that was really eye-opening, everything from the cats on laptops and leaf blowers in the background, right when we're giving like an important seminar, which fortunately I rescheduled our gardeners for today. So they're not doing their leaf blowing right now. But just, being reassured that we actually are going through different challenges, but everybody's going through a different backstory and nobody really knows what everybody just came from right before they turned on their video cameras. And so to be understanding and more tolerant and just more compassionate about the lives that we're getting glimpses into, but that we really don't know what's going on behind those computer screens. And I think that that's kind of something that has become hit or miss in academia. Some PIs are amazing with that, incredibly understanding. They've adjusted their way of communication, their evaluation criteria, and some have been much more difficult to talk to. And I'll get to that in a couple of slides, some strategies for how to kind of mediate that conversation with your mentor as you go through grad school. But as we've seen with, even at the NIH level, they've kind of readjusted their evaluation for their timelines. There's an extension of your eligibility for certain grants that you would otherwise, need to apply for by a certain time in your graduate career or in your postdoctoral career have now been extended. So there is some flexibility there. We know that now we're teleworking a lot more. We're doing a lot more of those virtual meetings. And that has been kind of a pro and a con because we're able to get a lot more done with meeting wise. We don't have to physically go from space to space, but then at the same time, we book meetings back to back and it just seems like we're constantly staring at a computer screen. So next slide. And I don't know that UC Davis's policy or not, but I know that for OHSU, we have extended the time to graduation as well. I know it never feels really good to delay your graduation, but there has been flexibility with, understanding that COVID has set back a lot of research, especially research that has to be done in person. Like we have a wet lab, and because we work with translational animal models, that has all, taken a pretty large hit. So, in our case, it might take a little bit longer for some students in our department to graduate. And also as like the grad program director, we have asked like all of our committees to be mindful of, their evaluation so that they're not looking at, students and expecting the same kind of progress that they would under normal circumstances. And so hopefully Davis is doing that as well. And so what we're probably going to be returning to, and I was talking to Jillian about this before we started, is it really looks like we're never quite going back 100%, but that maybe slowly we'll start going back kind of here and there for certain events. And hopefully we'll get back to, a full in-person like seminars and classes and conferences at some point. But, and probably Jennifer can talk a little bit more about this, is that, so 70% of managers are, a lot more open to flexible working models, but that even after, whenever after might be, and that might not be, that might be a continuum, but after the bulk of the pandemic, 1/3 of employees are going to continue to work remotely. So back where I lived for 7 years in the Bay Area, a lot of those companies in industry have completely transitioned to a very flexible model where their employees are allowed to work 100% remote, but they do take a 10% pay cut. So that is kind of the behind the scenes caveat to working remotely. But Bay Area salaries are so high that 10% is still like, oh, well, you have a lot of money, so now you just have not quite as much, a lot of money. So everybody seems to be adjusting just fine to that. But the one thing that we still struggle with is, again, so my favorite PhD comic, you struggle with guilt because now you're at home a lot, and the longer that you spend just doing something that would normally be okay because you've separated, you're not physically, in your cubicle, in your lab, you're at home, but then now that space has also become work. And so, you feel more and more anxious the more time that you're just focusing on yourself and doing things that you need to take a break and mentally stabilize yourself. That just becomes harder and harder to just completely cut that cord and have that separation. Next slide. Sorry, I saw something go up in the chat, but I'm like not.
Yeah, it was a quick question about the reasoning behind the pay cut that you had just mentioned.
Oh, the industry pay cut for being remote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, industry's way. I mean, this is biotech, and so directly, so I want to say that these were like the big ones, like Google and Apple in the Bay Area. Those were the two main ones, but then biotech did it as well. So they do ultimately want their employees to be close by for, potential in-person returns, but they're saying that the main reason why the salaries were what they were is because you live in the Bay Area, which is absurdly unreasonable to live in. And so they're thinking, well, these people are moving to, places that have a lower cost of living, in the Midwest. And so they don't have the same reasoning and the same need for, supporting, their lifestyle. But it doesn't change the amount of work that you're doing or the quality of work. So there's been a lot of controversy with that because you're saying that just because you're in a different location, that you're not worth as much. So, but they're big companies, so they push back, and unfortunately that's kind of the standard that they've set up. But not all companies are like that. A lot of startups are a lot more flexible and aren't implementing those kinds of pay cuts.
And I can say too, in general, business industry, so sometimes that has been happening because if you're a remote worker, you are contributing, or you have less impact on overhead within the office. So you physically not being in the office, less electricity, less internet usage. I mean, obviously there's something on the home side that may or may not be compensated, but a lot of the in-office types of things, maybe like going back to what I was saying about employee morale, that the break room was always fully staffed. There was bottled water service or drinks always available, what have you. So that physically not being in the office has been able to result in some cutbacks in areas, and sometimes that has resulted in the need for cutting back on salary.
Yeah, and so, an aspect that is going to be universal, whether you're in academia or in industry, is just this Zoom fatigue. And so this is an article that was actually written by the founder and CEO of Zoom. And so he suggested to, so these are things that he does to try and mediate Zoom fatigue, and that's to take scheduled breaks away from the computer, to try and book meetings for 25 minutes or 55 minutes. But I know we always book right to the hour, and it's so hard to tear yourself away those last 5 minutes and be like, I need to just take a break. And so some people are super mindful of that. They're like, okay, if you need to take a break for the first, 3 minutes of this, feel free to go ahead. You turn your camera off and do what you need to do. But a lot of us book back to back, and it's kind of expected that we're right on time with the start of the next meeting. So try to just allow yourself 5 minutes in between the meetings. Use chat or email in lieu of a meeting. There's so many times that somebody just wants to ask me a question, but instead they want a WebEx meeting or they want a Zoom meeting and it's scheduled for a half hour. And then it's like, do we really need to do that? Or could we just have done it, by a text message kind of thing? And then the other thing that I thought was interesting is try turning off the self view. I know that it gets distracting just seeing yourself talk a lot. And like, I know that, for example, when I Skype with my mom, like she's constantly watching herself and so absorbed with like what she looks like. And I know that others are probably distracted with that too. So maybe if you turn off the self view when you do these meetings, then it's more like you're actually talking to the person. You're seeing their face and not your own, because that's not like a normal interaction. You wouldn't normally see your face in a mirror next to the person that you're talking to. And then what I also try to do is implement these no internal meetings days. So I try to always set aside like 2 days a week where I just don't have meetings. So I always try to schedule meetings, like Monday, Tuesday, Friday kind of thing, and then leave Wednesday, Thursday open. And so then you just mentally know when you go into this that like you're going to have some downtime from all of these meetings. And then again, this is harder than easier said than done, have boundaries around personal time. And I'll get into that in the next slide. So next slide. Oh yeah, so sorry, it'll actually be the next slide, but really quick on this one, again, PhD comics. So some of these haven't changed. This is where my best ideas usually come from. Sitting in my office, doing dishes, walking to lunch, talking to someone, taking a shower. So yeah, so we can still take a shower and come up with all of those amazing ideas, but can we talk to somebody about them that easily? Not as easily. We can't just go like Jennifer showed, like the water cooler and just chat it up with somebody. And as a new faculty, I'm constantly trying to think how am I going to interact and get to know my other faculty members when we have to always do these formal meetings whenever we want to talk about something. I can't just walk over to them and say, hi, hey, I had this idea about this cool research project. It has to be oh, when are you available? Let's look at your schedule, my schedule, and link up that way. And so you're just missing those organic interactions. And that's really where I think, it's a struggle at this time to be in academia, because that's really where, talking to your colleagues is where all of the great creative ideas really can happen. So next slide. And so for this, these are just kind of my own suggestions and what I implement with my own students and my own lab, and what I also recommend to students who come to me for feedback in the grad program. So with online learning, this is where we can have these challenges that I have on the left side and then possible solutions on the right. One, so sometimes it feels like you're just being talked at, even right now I'm talking at you. But to try and, we try to integrate interactiveness, but it's still not the same as if you're in person. So where you can play somewhat of a role is with course feedback. That's become really important. I know it's at the end of the course. Hopefully some instructors have survey monkeys go out midway through the course to really tell them how things are working for you, and you have that power. They want to be able to communicate well to you. So if something's not working, do not hesitate to let them know. Take opportunities to meet with the instructors outside of class, beyond office hours, just having more interaction with them. They can become your strongest network later on. And reach out to other students who have taken the courses in the past if you're struggling. And then always, meet with program coordinators and directors. I get students that are not my own, always asking me for advice on either coursework or on, just other aspects of the program, or just life in general, on career planning, everything. So don't hesitate to reach out to people. In terms of, all of us are in the grad programs needing to meet your mentor's expectations. So hopefully you're meeting one-on-one with them. I meet weekly with my students. I think it's really good to just have a standing meeting to always, catch up with your mentor and make sure that you're on the same page. To have a mentorship plan and an IDP, so an individual development plan, where you sit down at least every 6 months and you go over your broader goals of your research and your career and make sure that you're on the same page, and just to kind of have that communication open. And I go over everything from vacation expectations to research, skills development, how we're progressing, and just making sure that they feel like they're well supported and they have the opportunity to ask for the resources back from me. So don't hesitate to let your mentor know that you need that kind of mentorship plan or those weekly meetings, because they can really help mediate any, confusion or feeling like you're lost in this like space where your mentor isn't in every single day. And then kind of research progress, communicate with your mentor, reach out to collaborators. You're going to have to probably take a little bit more of an initiative in these times to really find collaborations. And, you might have to do a little bit more legwork on your own to actually find the collaborations that you might need. But, maybe go and attend other people's lab meetings. If you, know that you're collaborating with somebody, attend their lab meetings and something organic might happen from there. And then I really do encourage, whenever you can, and if it's safe, to return to some kind of in-person events. We polled our students for a summer seminar, whether they wanted to return to in-person versus virtual, and 75% said virtual. And so I know it's really hard to get back to doing that in-person event, but trust me, like it will be well worth it, because I know that we've done a year now where we have this virtual space. We can turn off our cameras, eat lunch, exercise, take a nap behind it. But you are still missing, that interaction and just being able to chat science, chat engineering, chat whatever, you're interested in. And so I would encourage you to be open to a safe return to in-person events. That is all I have. So I think
Thank you.
we have
Yeah.
transition.
Yes, thank you so much, Jennifer and Karina, both for an excellent presentation. So we definitely have roughly 15 minutes or so available for questions. And as I mentioned earlier, all of our attendees, feel free to just drop your question in the chat, or if you'd like to raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and ask your question aloud. And while we're waiting for those questions to pop up, I'll just go ahead and put my email address as I promised earlier. Do we have a little bit more information prior as we're waiting for the questions?
So I wanted to reiterate some of the things that Karina had talked about and then I mentioned earlier. So just tips that you can use today. We feel that from, the blending of the physical and mental spaces into that single home workspace, like was said, aim for schedules and routines as much as possible, but in direct conflict of that, be flexible, manage expectations, both on the personal side and the professional side. So be realistic with your scheduling. Don't forget your own self-care. Definitely need a lot of humor these days into the work-life balance or life-work balance. And as Karina actually pointed out very well, not every meeting needs to be a Zoom meeting. So really consider that phone call or that text message or the chat mechanism. We don't need to be living in a Zoom meeting for everything going forward. And then the other thing we wanted to leave you with is just to open the conversations that need to happen. I think you can tell that whether in academia or business industry, there's a lot of more communication almost in a sense that needs to happen that rather than less during the pandemic. So talk, between you and your boss, definitely, or your superiors, you and your coworkers or subordinates, but really most of all, you and your loved ones to figure out what this all means, not just from the health and safety perspective of work and home life, but also just, what does your personal time mean? And as we brought up today, how does that blend together? What's acceptable for you or your significant other or your kids or extended family? And, just put it on the table, because if the conversations don't happen, it's bound to lead to more resentment or just upsetness, whether on the career side or the personal side. And no one wants that. Right? The pandemic itself is hard enough for us to all deal with, and the changes to our work environment, that we need to think about our personal lives and really try to make priorities, especially when it comes to communications with that. So Jillian, if there's anything.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. So we do have a few questions in the chat. I'll start with the first one that came in. So any recommendations on how not to feel guilty about working or not working hard enough or as effectively as before?
So I want to say that
I'll jump first.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Real quick, I'm a lover of to-do lists and checklists and things like that, probably because of the engineering background, I've been told. But simple things like just writing down, not necessarily a to-do list, but an accomplishment list. And you may think that they're small, or maybe it's something that you do every day, but can help you maybe not feel guilty. Or if you don't see very many things on there, then maybe you're rightly so to feel guilty. But either way, I'd say to write something down, or put, notes inside of an app in your phone and track it that way. Karina, did you have something else?
I like the comment about the ta-da list. I think that kind of summarizes it. And yeah, the only other thing I would add is that you're probably working really hard and you're just not giving yourself enough credit. And I think that's something I found out, with every member of my lab, is that they're constantly questioning themselves and like if they're being as productive, and they are, but it's just that they're not getting as much constant feedback. And so it's hard for them to really know that they actually are being pretty productive. But I would highly encourage that, if you have that open communication with your mentor or your, collaborators, your committees, and just ask them for feedback. Like, how do you think I'm doing? And most likely they'll tell you that you're doing really awesome and that you shouldn't be doubting yourself.
Thank you. So our next question is, any advice on developing an IDP for an academic track, or suggested resources for tools for starting that conversation with an advisor or mentor?
Yeah, so I saw that somebody put a link in the chat, and yeah, I kind of second that. I mean, all IDPs are not universal. I don't know if UC Davis has one implemented. A lot of universities have started that. So, that's going to be up to, the grad coordinators and the grad program directors to implement it as something that is required. So we have started to require it now for all of our grad students and mentors. But it's kind of, it is a hard conversation to bring up, but if your mentor isn't doing it on their own, it's in your best interest to just be like, hey, like, I heard that there is this, IDP that kind of, it gets everybody on the same page. And I'm really interested in, just talking about it, making sure that, I'm making the progress that you want me to make, and kind of frame it that way to show that like you're caring about, the progress of the lab, the progress of the research. And I think, hopefully they would have a pretty good reception to something like that. And then if you bring kind of a document as an example to the table, then they'll be much more likely to be like, okay, yeah, let's go through this, and just, ask for a half hour of their time. An hour is better, but, I think just let them know that you're interested in making sure that you are, accounting for the progress that you need to make in your degree.
Thank you. So the next question is from Danielle. In a time of COVID, can you provide specific examples of how you change the structure of your workdays to preserve your mental health?
I don't know if it's always successful for me, but I can say there's been two things. So I talked about staggered schedules for the staff here, and that's time of day, but it's also day of week. And we try to stick to the same day of week that we're working from home. And that provides consistency across the staff to know, okay, who's going to be physically in the office space at what time. But there's also consistency, therefore, for home life. So when things do need to happen, appointments, medical appointments, what have you, my husband knows, okay, this Wednesday, let's just take Wednesday, that would be my regular work from home day, unless something else really pressing comes up. So then we can know ahead of time to plan around it. So again, a little bit of structure, I think, helps with that. Also, I didn't mention earlier, so during all of this, I have a 2-year-old, 2.5, almost 3-year-old son who's going to grow up not knowing anything different than post-pandemic life, right? I mean, he doesn't know what it's like to be in these large gatherings or anything that would have been for a child that's older at this point. And so one of the things that we've found we're trying to establish in our family is, we call it Aloha Fridays because we're here in Hawaii. You can call it whatever you'd like, but to emphasize what specialness Fridays used to have, like Karina's PhD comic said, what is a weekend anymore? It really doesn't exist, right? But we wanted to impart something, because we remember being kids and how special it was to go on spring break or summer break or even the weekend to be here, and how special Friday was, and that feeling of elation as the school bell rang and you knew that you were done. And so we miss that now that we're doing all of this work from home. And even if you're not working from home, the constant connectivity to your tablet, to your laptop, to your cell phone, so anyways, our tactic is to do Aloha Friday with our son, and we reemphasize that by giving him a new book every Friday. So he learns that it's Friday, and Friday means new book day. So it's this, we're trying to substitute an elation kind of feeling, but still showing him that there's something to look forward to in certain days of the weeks, because it may return, one of these days, and certainly when school age truly hits for him and things like that. But so we're trying to do special aspects, family movie night or things like that too, associated with Fridays.
Yeah, and I think there's been, I'd say, so many changes. One kind of off the bat with like kind of household changes is, so my partner and I are obviously both working from home, and he's a musician, so he's loud, and so we have to coordinate when I have talks where I'm like, okay, mic is on. So we actually created, it sounds kind of overly organized, but a Google Calendar, so that he knows like when I'm in meetings that I'm going to have my mic on the whole time. And then he'll try to schedule, the times that he's, teaching or recording, and has that electric guitar turned way, way loud around my meeting. So it just takes a lot more communication and scheduling, especially within the household. I know that faculty members have had to struggle with like bandwidth as well. And again, it's trying to communicate and schedule something like that. The other thing is kind of a little bit of an inside thing, is I've always wanted like a nap space or a bed space in my office. And so now I have that. I don't know if you can see behind me, that is my cat. And that is my like little bed area, makeshift bed, so that I can just plop down, for 15 minutes in between meetings and just decompress and be like, okay, this is fine. This is, actually what, I've always wanted. So in a way that has kind of become something fun and rewarding to be able to work from home.
Thank you both for those wonderful answers. As we're waiting, we have maybe time for one more question. As we're waiting, I just putting the chat, the link to the Tuesday talks again. And I think someone had asked earlier if these are recorded, and they are, and you can find all of the recordings at that link, as well as the information for the remaining 2 Tuesday talks. So do we have any final questions before we end? Okay, if not, I want to allow Karina and Jennifer, if you have anything that you want to add before we officially close, feel free to take that time to do so now.
No, I think it was, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. And I think it's such an important topic, and hopefully you do have wellness resources available at Davis. I mean, it's a great institution. I would imagine that there's some wellness resources out there. Maybe your PI hopefully has some, lab meetings that are not fully focused on research and might focus a little bit more on lab community. And yeah, just don't feel guilty about doing things for your mental health. I think that's so important, because if you're in a good headspace, you're going to be more productive, and everything else is going to fall into line. If you push yourself, stress yourself, and constantly are forcing yourself to be, work all the time, like it's not going to end well. So, take the time, take the space to breathe, decompress, do things for fun, take vacations, and you deserve it.
So I saw someone in the chat. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jennifer.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was going to say, embrace that this is new territory for everyone. So your superiors, subordinates, whether you're in academia or business, so no silly question, no stupid question, it's just uncharted territory for everyone. And so be open and be flexible. And if you're having the same problem, or if you're having a problem, probably somebody else is too in your office or in your lab. So just open the conversations again is what I really, really encourage. And yes, I think we should go with the CEO from Zoom and end this before the top of the hour.
Well, thank you. Just two quick things. So Jessica, thank you. Put a link to some wellness resources that folks can access. I also put a link to the next Tuesday talk, which will be focusing on academic success in nonprofit leadership. So with that, I just want to thank Jennifer and Karina one more time for being so generous with your time and sharing your insights in these resources with us today. And I also want to thank our attendees for participating in today's Tuesday talk. I will stick around for a minute or two if anyone has questions, but go ahead and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
And Jillian, I don't know if everybody has our contact